It's Des,
It's deep.
and you're listening to It's Really That Deep.
We have takes on everything we are watching.
Today we're talking Superman, a 2025 superhero movie based on the eponymous character from DC Comics. It's written and directed by James Gunn. We know it's going to be one of the biggest movies of the year. Superman is fundamentally a story about an immigrant in America in particularly xenophobic times.
So, what background did you have about this movie going in?
Like many people, I have known what Superman is since I was a little kid. I've watched all the recent movies, including all the Zack Snyder DC movies that starred Henry Cavill. I loved Smallville growing up, where Tom Welling played Superman and Erica Durance played Lois. That is my favorite Superman performance. I've seen a couple of James Gunn movies like The Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy. A lot of the cast I'm pretty familiar with. I love Nicholas Hoult that plays Lex Luthor very much. I didn't know much about David Corn Sweat. I'd seen him in this movie I'd watched called Pearl, and he was in Twisters, but that's about it. But I did have quite a lot of context and knowledge of this movie going in.
I have to concede I'm not a massive comic fan or Superman fan, but after seeing the dialogue around this movie and some of the themes, it did sound like something that would be interesting to me. I didn't know anything about David Cornsweet either, but I must say I'm now a fan. And yeah, it wasn't for his acting, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, aside from that, I did know about Nicholas Hoult, and yeah, apart from that, not much.
Very interesting that you're a fan of David Corn Sweat now. Was Superman good, bad, or mid?
It was definitely good. I left that cinema feeling very entertained. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. I was pleasantly surprised. Now, I think the reason for that is because, again, I don't have a very high tolerance for these sorts of movies. So I kind of went in expecting trope after trope, you know, cheesy storylines. And I did get some of that. But I also got a lot of heart and soul. And I loved it for that. What did you think?
I'm so surprised to hear that. So this is the thing. We watched this movie together, but we have not spoken about this film until this point. I'm so surprised to hear that from you because think of you as a person that's so far removed from superhero films. I've always been like, is there any superhero movie of this type that D can ever like? I know you liked the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight movies, but those are
Mm-hmm.
kind of their own thing. So it's very interesting that you liked it so much. If you force me, I will say it's good. But for
Interesting.
me, this is a good movie leaning on it.
Mm.
But if you absolutely make me pick one, I'll say it's good because I was definitely entertained. Let's discuss the plot of Superman. Act 1. Clark is a reporter for the Daily Planet in Metropolis. He's in a relationship with Lois Lane, who does know his secret identity as Superman. He recently stopped an invasion by a state called Boravia, which is an ally of the United States, and they invaded Jampur. At the start of the movie, we see that Lex Luthor is trying to destroy Superman. What do you think of the beginning of the film?
To be honest, I think one of the issues I have with this movie is that I really struggle to distinguish between the acts because it's so breakneck fast. I would say good overall for someone who's not a Superman fan. There was basically no attempt to even give me a proper background about who Superman is, who especially who Clark Kent is. That no background on Lewis, no background on basically anybody important in the movie. But apart from that, they did do a good job of setting the scene of the political issues. What about you?
My understanding is that with this movie, they were like, you guys know who Clark Kent is. You know who
Mm-hmm.
Superman is. We're not really wasting too much time explaining this to you because they're like, at this point, superhero movies for the last 20 years have been the biggest movies in the world.
Mm.
Almost everybody has been given the context. We're just not going to linger on it. There's nothing original we can show you. So I actually appreciated that because I have seen this a billion times. I have watched every Superman movie that came out in the last 20 years. I've watched several series as well. So I didn't care to see any of that stuff established. No shade, this movie doesn't have that much of a visual signature that I think they would have
Mm.
an extremely fresh perspective to take on that. Anyways, I like that we just drove right into the geopolitics quickly. I was very
Mm.
taken aback early on how quickly we dove into it. The scene in Lois's apartment where Clark and Lois are doing the pseudo interview is probably the best written scene between them for me in the film. So in Act 2, billionaire Lex Luthor invades Superman's fortress. He then broadcasts to the world a message from Superman's parents urging him to conquer the earth and take as many wives as needed to restore the Kryptonian race. Luthor then imprisons Superman in an artificial pocket dimension. He tortures him, and then Superman eventually escapes.
Again, as I mentioned, this movie moves at incredible pace. This act probably one of the more fast paced, but it was good because I felt tense, right? And that's the purpose of this act, is to make you realize what's at stake here, is to make you realize the injustice of it all. But I did feel at this point that I didn't know what was going on for a lot of it, because bear in mind I hadn't had much of the backstory about Superman, who he is and such. I didn't understand why Lex Luthor was able to get
That's
into the
because
fortress. But aside from
D,
that,
that's because it did, that particular part didn't make that much sense.
at that point, we did find out why he was able to get in the end. But yeah, at that point, I did feel a bit like, I'm missing a lot of information. But again, that's okay. I'm okay with waiting to the end to get some reveals. I think when it comes to the cinematography, the imprisonment section was my favorite. I
Really?
really loved yeah, I really liked it because apart from that, everything else has been done. I really like seeing just how depressing that kind of imprisonment situation is, and more importantly, how that really echoes
For
things that are happening in
me,
real life.
in this part of the movie, I really started being very curious about what the film was trying to say, especially with regards to the geopolitics and also disinformation in the era of tech. I've seen different stances on it, but my take
Mm,
as I was watching this movie was pretty unambiguously that Lex Luthor was lying and that that video his parents didn't actually say that. That was my
mm,
stance on it. Only for me to come out and I was speaking to people, they were like, "Oh no, 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 no! They actually did say that," and I was like, "Why do you guys believe that? Why would you believe that that's true?" Not because I don't believe an alien race would be interested in colonizing the Earth, but I'm like, this kind of character isn't the point that he's exactly the kind of person who would manipulate footage or technology to try and weaponize it through information systems. So that was really affecting how I was viewing those scenes going forward because I was asking myself,
mm,
are we supposed to believe that his parents really said that and Lex is weaponizing that successfully? Or are we supposed to believe that this is a hoax? I also found that this is the point where the geopolitics of the movie were becoming more and more and more overt. And I was like, oh, so they're really
mm.
going there. They're really,
They're
really
going
going
there, yeah. For me, the scene that really set that tone was the execution scene, and I think that was when I really realized, oh, like they're being very serious because of course that type of execution is associated with a very particular geopolitical situation, and also I think seeing the prison and how it echoes what's going on in El Salvador, for example. I think that's when I really understood I was gonna like this movie actually because he wasn't afraid to touch on certain topics. I do think that he could have gone there even more, but we'll get into it.
In Act 3, Lex Luthor creates a black hole that splits the city in half. Superman fights with Ultraman, who is revealed to be a clone of himself. Mr. Terrific eventually closes the black hole. Lois and Jimmy reveal that Lex secretly backs Barovia in return for half of Jaranpol's territory, and they clear Superman's name. Hawkgirl kills the president of Barovia, and Luthor and his cohorts are all arrested.
So I liked this act because this is when they really owned in on the unapologetic geopolitical commentary. However, it was my least favorite act because it felt incredibly undisciplined. It felt like all of those questions that I had during Act 2 and Act 1 were finally being answered within like 1 minute. It was just bam, 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 new fact, new fact, new fact. Incredibly hard to follow. I was able to forgive it because, again, I like the message. I'm known for being a cynic in real life. I'm always questioning things. I don't trust people. I don't trust governments. I don't trust anybody. And I think it's good for people like me to see depictions, whether it's in real life or even in fiction, of radical optimism. I left that movie feeling like, you know what, maybe I should try to be a bit more trusting. I won't, but maybe I should try. What did you think?
The last part of this movie is completely undisciplined. You're completely correct. Extremely
Mm-hmm.
undisciplined. One of the most undisciplined I've seen from James Gunn or these kind of superhero movies in a while. Yet, this was the part of the movie that myself and my friends I was watching with were giggling the most through. We were kicking through. We were laughing.
Mm,
We were gasping. We were jumping. It was very popcorn in a way that I generally just naturally enjoy in the cinema. Biggest issues with the female characters are in this part of this movie. I think the way they
yeah.
try to have Lois still participate in the narrative while she's separated from Superman are unsuccessful. I think that
Mm-hmm.
the context they give of the Kents back at home in Kansas is some of the most questionable depiction of the Kents I've ever seen in fiction. Oh
Interesting.
yeah, very questionable. And I think the science here is completely nonsensical, but in the best comic book where I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
that. I think this is the part where the movie gets its most cheesiest, in the best and the worst ways. That radical optimism generally gives warm and fuzzy feelings in a way I really enjoy it. But some of the line deliveries and some of the writing of that radical
Mm.
optimism were just preposterous to me. And this is the part of the
Yeah.
movie where I started having some questions for some of the cast acting abilities. Let's talk about the characters in this movie. Clark is a very golden Labrador retriever. You were very receptive to him because Corin Sweat was clearly working on you.
I have to say, I was being very thirsty in Act One. I didn't know anything about this man before. And all I could think, you know, that scene with him and Lois, right?
Mhm.
All I could think was, wow, this man is very big. Like, he's huge.
I literally, I literally was saying this. I was saying this as I was leaving the cinema. I was like, "This is what Dee likes. She
Mm-hmm.
likes her men big." And
Big.
Horace went multiplied in size for this movie, and he fills the frame. Henry Cavill's Superman was also big, but Brandon Roth's Superman wasn't that big, and
Mm-hmm.
Cornsworth feels tall and sturdy and boxy in a
Yeah.
very, very, I can't lie, satisfying way.
I was being very thirsty. I'm not gonna lie to you. So a lot of things that were bugging me in Act One, I let it go because I thought, well, at least I get to enjoy this man. And there was a point where he's in his shirt and like his pants, right? And I swear to you, his legs were looking like they were two-thirds of his body. I was like, this is what Superman is supposed to look like. I can't believe people were upset about his casting. He does it very well. Now, when it comes to his acting,
Now I'm understanding why you like this movie so much. It's really about this man.
his acting though, he did a good job of portraying that radical optimist, the golden retriever. The issue I have with him, though, I think a lot of men mistake vulnerability with immaturity. There was something about his portrayal of Superman that came across immature for me. And I'm not someone who thinks that a man being vulnerable is immature. So I was just like, there's something that's not connecting with me here because you're Superman. You shouldn't be immature.
What's that incompetence thing? Weaponize incompetence, but
Weaponizing
with
competence,
vulnerability.
yeah, yeah, it was bugging me.
I really went back and forth. I think he is a good Superman. Henry Cavill's Superman is questionable because Henry Cavill doesn't know how to emote. Sometimes it works for the Snyder movies, sometimes it doesn't. With this Superman, emoting is not a problem. He's all raw emotions throughout. And that can work for a lot of the scenes. And he does have chemistry with his cast members. But I know exactly what you mean. There's certain scenes where I'm like, are you a little boy?
Right?
Sit up,
Literally.
sit up. But then you get distracted by Corin Sweat's dimples and the
Mm-hmm.
curl of his hair and
Mm-hmm.
how broad his shoulders are, and then it stops mattering.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not gonna lie, I was very embarrassed of myself in Act One. I had to sit up. Honestly, I had to stand up.
Yeah, I like this Clark. I think this is a good Clark. This is a good Clark Kent. It's still not the best. The best is still Tom Welling. I know that Christopher Reeve is considered by many purists to be the ultimate Superman, and there's a lot of
Mm,
people that love Dean Cain's Superman as well. But as a zillennial, my Superman is Tom Welling on the CW. Corin Sweat
mm,
has already acknowledged that he is basically paying tribute to that Superman, which I actually find very endearing because that's not a big screen Superman. So for him to understand that one of the best Superman is this teen drama Superman and he's giving him his flowers. I actually do like that a lot, and that made me very
mm-hmm,
warm towards him. Tom Welling is still the best Superman to me, but Corin Sweat is probably up there for me with him.
mm,
Lois Lane as a character, I understand what they are trying to do with her kind of character. She's a modern, cynical
mm-hmm,
journalist type who can't fully figure out relationships, but she wants to help and she wants to love and
mm-hmm.
she wants to do the right thing and she understands that life is full of grace. She's not dissimilar to you and I.
Literally.
Rachel Brosnahan is an actress I like a lot, and I really, really like the fact that she was cast in this movie because she's not younger than 30 years old. I know that
Oh.
that's I know that that shouldn't be a radical thing, but unfortunately it kind of is for big Hollywood
Mm-hmm.
movies trying to appeal to mass audiences. So I do like the fact that the biggest love interest of the biggest cartoony Superman movies was a woman that wasn't like extremely young. I enjoy that. 30s is still young, but you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean.
I
She's
know what
not
you
a
mean, yeah.
baby. I
Yeah.
like that. I don't love her depiction of Lois Lane.
Interesting.
There was something about the way they established the dynamic between the two
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, there is a bit of warmth here that I'm missing. I think that it's not really
Mm.
just about the failing of the actors. I think it's a writing issue. They are kept apart too much in this movie for me.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my favorite Superman stories keeps the Clark Kent and Lois Lane relationship very intact, just as intact as the hate between Clark and Lex Luthor. They got that part on lock. Clark
Yeah.
and Lois, for me, it was a bit stilted. At the end of the movie, when you get the classic, iconic Superman kisses Lois Lane and he brings her up in the air and they're twirling, it's such a beautiful shot, but it didn't feel fully
Didn't
earned
buy
for
it.
me.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed because I really wanted to really fall in love with their dynamic because David Cornsworth and Rachel Brosnahan were castings I enjoyed, and I really liked seeing how they've been promoting the movie. And I think they do have real life chemistry with each other. I don't fully feel like this
Yeah.
movie captured it.
So I would even go one step further and say I didn't buy that love story at all. I didn't. When I'm first introduced to that relationship, and you've already called out the term already, he shows us that he's a weaponized, incompetent type of man, right? He claims, "Oh, I'm making your favorite dinner, which is breakfast," and then she says, "No, it's your favorite dinner. I just like breakfast for breakfast." Immediately setting the scene that this is an immature man. And for the particular character, the way how they've portrayed a Lewis Lane, again, I'm not a Superman fan, so I'm going based on this movie. She would know that that's no sign of kindness. This is just like a poor attempt to woo her or something, right?
But look at him, though. But look at
But
him.
so this is my point. So I was thinking to myself throughout this movie, what is holding these two together? Is it that she's just being thirsty like me and she's saying that this is a big man and I just want to be around this big man? Or is it something else? And the movie tries to bring us on this journey through her performance that actually she's a cynic and she's not obsessed with love in the same way how the stereotypical woman is. And then she's suddenly swayed because he's a punk rocker like her, and I just wasn't buying it. The only way I could understand the connection between them is if she was just being thirsty, but she wasn't giving me that in her performance. So there was basically nothing that I could see that made sense as to why these two have this quote unquote undeniable connection that basically everyone around them can see, but I'm not seeing it.
I kind of agree. They are Clark and Lois as a couple in this movie because Clark Kent and Lois Lane are supposed to be together, but the movie
Yeah.
doesn't convince us. I will say though, even despite all of this, I think my single favorite emotional moment in this whole movie is a Lois moment.
Mm,
It's after Clark has been harmed and they take him back to Kansas after she rescues him. He's in his parents' house. She's seeing his family home for the first time. She's seeing his childhood bedroom for the first time. And she looks up and she sees the poster for the Crazy Pumpkins or whatever the
mm,
name of the punk rock, but not so punk rock band is.
mm,
And her cynicism kind of is softened because she's like, oh,
mm,
he really is just who he says he is. He is
mm,
one of those people that what they tell you they are is who they are. And
mm,
no matter how much cynicism, irony, and suspicion you can take to those kind of people, some of those people are just genuinely that. And I have a friend like that, and it reminded me so much of her,
mm,
who for years now I've been trying to figure out, is she actually just one of those people that's always maintaining a veneer of sweet cartoonishness and earnestness, and there's actually some roiling darkness underneath? And is she genuinely as kind and sweet to everyone as she is to
mm,
me? And then eventually I realized, yes, that's actually just who she is. And I really treasure her presence in my life because she's very different from me and a lot of people I surround myself with. And I really
mm,
felt that moment. I don't know how to explain it. And there was Rachel just looks at the poster and you just see it in her eyes, and it really worked on me. So I will
mm.
give that. I will say that.
But the only thing I would just tack onto that is, like you said, you've just given a platonic version of that. So that scene alone wasn't enough to convince me. And that is the scene where the movie is trying to convince you that these two are supposed to be together, and it just didn't work for me.
Let's talk about Lex Luthor.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with you because I know this is your man. You love this guy.
I love Nicholas Holt so
Mm-hmm.
much. That is my man, my man, my man. And I
Mm-hmm.
know it feels like I say that in every episode. But that's my man, my man, my man. I've known him since he was a teenager on Skins, and I've loved him in so many different stuff. And he plays so well in different bits of genre, film, and
It's
TV,
true.
and that is my bag. So I always like when he shows up in different things and he does different takes on his awkward shtick.
Mm.
One of my favorite movies from last year is Nosferatu, and I
Mm-hmm.
loved him in Nosferatu. So I just love Nicholas Hoult. I was very happy they cast him. I've seen a lot of people say that it was basically genius casting to cast a person who auditioned to be Superman and was rejected, and then make him Lex Luthor because I just put him in the right
Mm-hmm.
mentality. It's
Yeah.
kind of true. I don't really know why Nicholas Hoult thought he was ever going to be Superman. No shade. I love you so much, babe, but that was never going to happen. I do think he's a bit too attractive to be Lex Luthor, though, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
His skin is a bit too smooth. He's a bit too pretty to me to be Lex Luthor. I'm used to a certain kind of Lex Luthor in my head. I enjoyed his Lex Luthor. It was campy. He was
Mm-hmm.
chewing up the scenery. He was doing the most. He was Elon Musking it up. We have seen multiple
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musks now in movies in the
Mm-hmm.
last couple of years. In Mickey 17, we had an Elon Musk. In Knives Out Glass Onion, we had an Elon Musk. I'm a bit tired of it, but I still wasn't tired of him doing it though, because I love
Mm.
Nicholas Holt.
I was shocked that he's a similar height to David Cornswear
Why?
because I don't know. I just thought there was something about the Lex Luthor character, and this would be a trope for sure. But I don't know. I just assumed that he would be small compared to Superman. And so this leads into my criticism, right? And again, I'm not sure that it's a criticism of the actor. I think he actually did a really good job. But I just think the writing was a bit weak. It's one dimensional. I'm sorry. The character was too one dimensional for me. I like my villains to be complex. Give me the proper backstory. Give me who bullied you, which girlfriend dumped you for Superman. Tell me and let me go on that journey with you.
When I was watching several scenes in this movie, I was like, oh, this Lex clearly has a borderline psychosexual obsession with
Absolutely.
Clark Kent stroke Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a take on this that I actually think is a very clever take on the Lex and Clark dynamic. Because no shade, there's a lot of rivalries I see between powerful men that always have homoerotic
Mm-hmm.
undertones to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, yeah, that feels like a natural conclusion. And honestly, in my opinion, Nicholas Holt was leaning all the way into it on camera and off camera.
Oh, off camera too.
Yes, if you see Nicholas Holt and David Cornswell, how they've been promoting this movie, certain things, I'm like, oh, okay, so you know what you're doing.
So in the movie, I think the single point that made me really own into this kind of homoerotic take is where Lex Luthor says, "Oh, Superman, you're not my type." And I was like, "Oh, you're lying, aren't you?"
Superman, after Superman says, I'm getting concerned with the level of your obsession with me.
Like,
And Lex very offhandedly says, don't worry, you're not my type. Like
mm-hmm,
Martian is not my type or Alien is not my type.
mm,
So making it clear that it's not gender that's going to make him not be his type. Now that could be seen as just like a silly little bit. But again, I think Nicholas Holt is a very intentional actor. So I
mm-hmm,
don't think that was delivered with complete sarcasm. It
mm-hmm,
reminded me of Daniel Craig and Javier Bardem's James Bond movie, where there is a scene where Javier Bardem is playing the villain. I can't remember if it's Quantum of Solace or whichever one it is, and
mm-hmm.
he's tied him up, and it is clearly implied that this movie's villain's obsession with the protagonist and the hero has homoerotic undertones, and the movie just straight up addresses it.
I actually think the homoerotic take was far more believable than what the movie actually tries to give us on the surface. To be honest,
You're saying that you were buying the love story between Lex Luthor and Superman more than you were buying the love story between Clark Kent and Lois Lane.
not only that, but I was buying into the homoerotic obsession more than the actual one, which is that I'm just envious of you, and this is just a massive phallus contest, basically.
For the other characters in the movie, Mr. Terrific, he got a very
Loved
warm
him.
reception in the cinema. I was very happy to see Eddie Gathegi in the role. I've seen him talk about how He was a character in X-Men First Class that people were excited about. They
Mm-hmm.
killed him off very quickly. He was promised that they would bring his character back, and they never did. So it's very nice
Mm-hmm.
that James Gunn gave him this opportunity to be a big part of a big superhero movie and just be beloved by fans. I felt very warm and fuzzy seeing that. Some of it was a bit too corny for me. Some of it was a bit too played for laughs sometimes. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I love the character design.
So what I'm about to say might upset some people. I liked Mr. Terrific more than Superman.
Is this movie even interested in Superman being the proper hero of the story? I'm not sure.
No, no,
I'm not
and
sure it is.
I'm not convinced that Superman is supposed to be seen as the proper hero here. I do think that's by design. And when I've actually listened to some of the interviews from James Gunn since, it does seem that that's where he was going with this. And there's a good reason to do that given the theme here of him being an alien, right? I think Mr. Terrific was the better superhero by far. It wasn't even close.
I thought that the Justice Gang were amusing enough. I had seen Nathan Fillion's haircuts in the trailer for the movie, and I was like, this is looking kind of crazy. But he delivered in being amusing and blending well with the rest of the cast in the movie.
This is a very thematically heavy movie. Let's start talking about the themes. The trivial point for this movie is talking about immigration and the fact that Superman is an alien. In the United States, they literally call illegal immigrants aliens. So that comparison was very much on the nose for me. What did you think about the depiction of Superman as an alien, an illegal immigrant, and how that plays out in the movie?
All Superman movies are always dealing with immigration. The question is, how far do they lean into it or lean away from it? But all of them
Mm-hmm.
always have. It is the tension that exists for this character who is this all American, tall white man that grew up in a farm in Kansas, but he is not only not actually originally born in the US, but he's not even born on the planet. He's about as alien as you can come. I hate the term alien. I hate the term illegal
Mm-hmm.
immigrant. I don't believe any
Mm-hmm.
human beings are illegal when we're born on this planet. So I
Mm-hmm.
just generally tend to shudder at that kind of language. And I enjoy art that criticizes how we other people in that way. I have a complicated relationship with the politics of this movie when it comes to domestic politics. International
Mm-hmm.
politics and geopolitics, perfectly interesting. I think it's well done. The domestic politics, I think this movie is trying to eat its cake and have it too. Because we're existing currently in this second Trump presidency era, this post quote unquote post woke era, this reactionary era, this oh, the world is so split, oh, there's so much ideological differences starting to be established between the genders that a lot of mass media is desperately trying to sell as sometimes to me kumbaya a message as possible. The way this movie tries to do it feels a bit too on the nose to me. There's a literal scene where a character says, well, both conservatives and liberals can agree. We all hate Lex Luthor. And I was like, if only it was that simple. Elon Musk has been rampaging up and down this planet, doing all sorts of outrageous things, saying all sorts of hateful things, gutting people's jobs in the US, discriminating against people, promoting basically the acceleration of ourselves into this AI tech dystopia. And he's still mostly embraced by the right. So I don't enjoy this whole fantasy of a world where we all link together and we can all agree that we don't like it where these evil billionaires get evil. That hasn't happened in the real world. Let's not pretend that that's happened. A lot of people, regardless of class, seem to enjoy choosing to align themselves with fascistic billionaires. So I tend to just flinch at some of that kind of narrative because I feel like it's so idealistic to the point of erasing the problem.
One of the reasons why I really enjoyed this movie is because even beyond immigration, I think it's the nation state or the concept of the nation state itself that was on trial in this movie. But because it's an American movie, basically, they had to do it in a light touch way. The whole point of having a nation state or the Western concept of it is so that you can keep people out. That's literally what a nation is about. It's about defining that this land, our resources, our people are for us only, and we will select who we want to have access to that or not. And so there's an automatic dehumanization that happens when you have a nation state. Now, what confused me is the fact that they made this point, like I said, in a light touch way, but it almost felt like they were too scared to fully commit to that message because, of course, America's famous for its nationalism. So they can't make that comment without isolating their audience, and I do understand that. But at the same time, I think it was good to see somebody who presents as a white man, at least, be so brutalized by what is basically the US nation state and have that depicted in a way where hopefully people can see that this is wrong. Because unfortunately, when it's a person of color on screen, people sometimes don't have the same empathy. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So I hope that by seeing this depicted with somebody who's white, somebody who's very attractive, someone who represents what a man is supposed to be in America, that this will encourage empathy for within people, so that next time when you see a person of color, when you see ICE rounding up immigrants, when you see people being brutalized and called aliens, children included, being called aliens and brutalized by the system, that you can remember this thing that you find disgusting in this movie and have empathy for them as well. I do think it was interesting that somebody says to Superman at one point that you don't have any rights, you're an alien, right?
Yes.
This is very much, again, true to real life. I also think it was interesting how there were some elements where I thought, are they making comments about how immigrants and illegal immigrants? Because sometimes internalize the nationalistic propaganda and use it against other people. So, for example, when Superman's family's message is exposed, then the Justice Gang, they kind of turn on him at one point, and it's like, oh, but we come from virtuous lands. We were sent here to save human beings. You're a dirty kryptonite. You came here to come and subjugate human beings. And I thought that was
Mm.
so, so interesting. Again, I'm not sure that James Gunn actually wants to go fully into that, but I do think to myself, if one of the big themes in this movie is about immigration and how propaganda informs people's opinions about immigration, then this is a great way to demonstrate how it can even work on the immigrants themselves.
And also note that those people, those meta-humans, they also are employees of Luthor, or they're working with the government. There's also something about when they are operating as agents of corporations, then that rhetoric of I am the good immigrant, I am the model immigrant gets dialed up even more.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Them literally saying to Clark that you are an alien, you have no rights.
Mm-hmm.
As a person who has been doing battles with the immigration system for the last 12 years of my life, it's something that I constantly have to be reminding myself that do not let these people dehumanize you, do not let these people dehumanize you, do not let these people dehumanize you. So that was effective on me.
I think another thing that I found interesting with the depiction of immigration through, again, someone who presents as a white man is the fact that Superman is very naively trusting of the United States justice system. And I
Mhm.
think about my family who live in the United States as Caribbean immigrants, and I can guarantee you they're not nearly as trusting, right? Because they're black and they know there's a high chance you'll be brutalized by the system.
This movie, at the end, when they show Lex Luthor getting arrested because it's revealed that he was plotting with
Mm-hmm.
Bavaria this whole time, and I was like, well, that's all nice and good, but that's not what would happen in the real world.
Exactly, exactly. And that's the reason why I'm saying that I'm not sure this movie wants to fully, fully go there. Because at the end of the day, the United States system is still portrayed as a savior, right? They go and save the people, quote unquote, who are in the prison. They arrest Lex Luthor, as you say. So again, it's like if you wanted to actually go there with this commentary, you would have to criticize the American military system, but this movie
Fully.
stops, yeah, fully. This movie stops short of doing that. And that's why I know they were trying to, not muddy the waters a bit too much.
I think at the end of the day, this is a Superman movie. It's a
Yeah.
movie for kids, one, and it's also just a Superman popcorn movie. It's not the Snyder Man of Steel style movies. Even those ones didn't fully go there in critiquing military industrial complex properly.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so far as they seem to be willing to go, and they'd already pushed it pretty far with the geopolitics
Mm-hmm.
outside. So that's why I keep saying that. I think for this movie, they kept the domestic politics pretty happy moderate
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
that they could lean quite far with the international geopolitics.
Mm-hmm.
it's funny to see them pretending that we live in a world where there will be proper checks and balances and institution checking billionaires and corporations just acting with impunity when it comes to people's lives, as if
Mm.
we're not literally witnessing what is happening in
In
real
real
time
life.
right
Mm.
now in not just the US but in Europe, other Western countries, but
Mm.
especially right now, specifically in the US, as if we did not see all of the people who were lined up in the White House on inauguration day,
Mm.
representing all the biggest companies in the world. After 4 years ago, there had been an insurrection in the US Capitol.
Mm.
I'm just like, I know that this whole movie is trying to do radical
Mm.
optimism, things can be better, let's dream of an ideal world. But I am a person who has to navigate this world as a
Mm.
Black immigrant
Exactly.
woman. I don't fully have the luxury of being able to completely escape to the fantasy, but I can
Mm-hmm.
see how that would be very inviting to be able to do. I saw a person describe this movie. They were being more critical of it than I was, as a Sunday morning kids cartoon introducing them to world politics and the importance of being kind. And that is honestly the most apt
Yeah.
summary of this film I've seen. They were saying it in a negative way. I don't think that's inherently a negative thing.
I think in this world, that's not negative at all. It's very much needed. We need more content like this. And funnily enough, I was thinking about Wicked when I watched this because the two movies have a lot in common, especially when it comes to the world of propaganda. One question I did have about this though is I found myself asking, how radical is Superman really? Because as I mentioned, Superman, he's naively trusting of the establishment, and then he's introduced to the fact that actually no, you can't trust this establishment. You don't have any rights. They've told you that explicitly, and the reason why you don't have any rights is because you're an alien, quote unquote. You're an illegal immigrant, right? And I think now that Superman has been brutalized, he's been imprisoned. They almost killed him, and he's come out. The movie doesn't get into it, but I wondered to myself, would he still be, given that we know that he's a optimist, a radical optimist even, would he still be trusting of this system or would he be trying to demolish the state?
And to me, this is where the failures of the Lois Lane Clark Kent relationship come in, because
Mm.
that would have been a more tightly written final act, would have answered that exact question you just asked by looping back in with Clark and Lois from that earlier conversation they had early in the movie. A movie that was trying to properly establish that connection those two have, not just romantically, not just intimately, but also personally, politically,
Mm.
socially, thoughtfully, mentally, would have had her do some kind of temperature check with him that now
Mm.
that this has happened, considering what we just thought about, what are you really thinking? What are you really feeling? And that could go either
Mm.
way. He could continue to be that radical optimist, or he could be a bit more jaded. I don't mind, but I would have enjoyed to get the delivery of how this film's final note is on this subject through the mechanism of their relationship. This is part of my criticism of this movie. Certain things are delivered with exposition instead of
Yeah.
the characters talking to each other in a way that normal people talk.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that Lex Luthor stuff is just spelling it out. And I'm like, no, no. I
Yeah.
don't need you to be Heath Ledger's, Christopher Nolan's Joker, speaking with three layers of metaphor and whatever. I don't need that. But you can't be doing all of this and then I'll take you too seriously. Let's talk about conflict in this movie. I was shocked as I was watching this film from the beginning of when it was introduced to the very end about how overt it was in its parallels to real life conflict zones in the world. There are multiple ones you could draw allusions and parallels to, but the most obvious one to me was the situation in Palestine and Gaza. There were also some elements of Ukraine, Russia, some elements even of India, Pakistan, and Kashmir. But the Gaza one was very overt to me. Other people have said this, but I had no idea about this really going in. So I was very shocked by how far they went. I kept on thinking, how did Warner Brothers agree to let James Gunn do this? Because when it comes to talking about major conflicts around the world, even mid-sized movies sometimes are a bit tiptoey around it. Very, very, very big mainstream appeal popcorn movies typically simplify things down to evil man, bad, good guy,
Mm,
good. They
mm,
I don't typically see them try to zoom in on certain kind of hotbed zones of the planet, use
mm-hmm.
certain kinds of aesthetics, use certain kind of militarized zones in such an overt way that they know that the audience will immediately draw lines to real thing. There is a scene where the Baravian military is starting to invade on land on Jaran Post territory, and you literally see them dressed in their army uniform with the flag of Boravia on their arm, and you see the shaken Jarampurian citizens, many of them with very primitive weapons and tools, and you see a little boy in almost in rags in this sandy background holding up a flag. And I was like, this is one of the most unambiguous depictions of the conflict in Gaza I have seen in mainstream pop culture in my entire adult life.
Yeah, so I would echo that. I was shocked to see how explicit they were being, but it did fall short to me. And the reason why is because I think the name is Jaranpur, right? It sounds South Asian. It doesn't necessarily sound Middle Eastern. So even that's a choice, right? Because you could have easily gone there and picked something that sounds a bit more Middle Eastern. So they are doing the tiptoe thing. And more importantly, I think one of the more egregious cases of tiptoeing is that this movie positions the ultimate power with Lex Luthor, right? And maybe who knows? Maybe they're making a commentary that actually billionaires are the ones who run everything, and governments are almost answering to the billionaires, right? But at the end of the day, in real life, with what's going on in Gaza, with what's going on in Ukraine, with what's going on in India, Pakistan, Cyprus, North Cyprus, list goes on. It is the governments, it's the Western governments that are involved with allowing for this sort of thing to happen. I understand that their core base is an American audience. I don't think the American mainstream audience is ready yet to have their military complex be critiqued on such a severe level on such a big platform. Um, that's what I'm saying, that I can't say with confidence that this is a proper critique of what's happening in Gaza because of the refusal to call out the United States government. And for me, that is solidified in the end when, again, we see the United States military institution be the one to come and save the people who are imprisoned and that sort of thing. So it falls one step short to me.
That's the note Warner Brothers gave maybe with the first draft. They were like, you know what, we'll let you do this, but the US still has to come and save the day at the end of the day. I think I'll give it more credit than you are giving because again, this is the furthest I've ever seen it go.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
just
I get that.
the bar is so low that this is actually still the furthest I've seen it go. I watch
Mm-hmm.
almost every big popcorn movie that ever comes. All of them always involve conflict. All of them
Mm-hmm.
always involve war. All of them always involve weaponry. And I've never seen it get this close to
Mm-hmm.
establishing the specific human rights violations that are
Mm-hmm.
happening to people that might look like the people that a lot of Americans see demonized on TV all the time to this level. The bar is low, you're right. They still cleared it higher than I've seen it cleared before at this level. Now, with your comment that basically the movie still refuses to allow the United States as a state be complicit in this,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't fully say that because there are scenes where Lex Luthor is hanging out with the Secretary of Defense. They know what he's up to. They know what he's doing.
Towards the end, they say they don't. Yeah.
They swooping at the end after the media has turned on him
Mm-hmm.
to save the day and arrest him, but they knew what he was up to. And I don't think that is completely dissimilar for what happens in real life either. Like, if you think about what's going on currently with the current richest man in the world, who is currently beefing with the president of the United States, after this same president's administration invited him to come and got the federal government, and then they got into a tussle over the credits and allowances
Mm-hmm.
he used to get for his corporation, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what led to their breakup. And now suddenly the state or the president or the administration is calling out
Mm.
the allowances that they had given to this same guy. I think this happens in real life.
But I think this helps me to solidify one of my issues with this movie and why I can't give it the full credit that people are giving it for being this radical movie, right? Because basically, according to this movie, if the inner workings of the military agreement between Israel and the United States and other governments was exposed, then that would be the end of the attack on Gaza. Because according to this movie, it's just a lack of information. We have the information. We know what is going on. There are people documenting it day by day in Palestine, right?
Netanyahu literally allowed the ceasefire to start after the US election results
Exactly.
came out.
So there is no expose that's needed. We have all the information. So that's what I'm saying, that this movie presents a solution to a fake problem because it's not actually willing to go there. It's still holding itself back. It's still restraining itself. And it was bugging me, but I understand why they have to do it. At the end of the day, it's a superhero movie. This is targeting an American base. They can't go around talking about how you have a tyrannical government.
What did you think about Ghurkos, the president of Boravia? What did you think about that character, the performance, the characterization, and the fate he ultimately meets?
Yeah. So I've seen people saying that it's a one-to-one comparison for Netanyahu. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's one-to-one. Are there overlapping themes? For sure. Absolutely. I don't love the performance because it was caricaturesque. Also, I had problems with the fact that there's a long-standing issue in especially these sorts of movies and animation movies where when there's a villain, there's an attempt to portray them as an Eastern European, and so even his accent, his crazy hair, all of that sort of stuff was very much, we've seen it a few times, find it a bit problematic. Having said that, are there governments that have that sort of motivation in real life? Absolutely. And I think we've already alluded to a number of them. And there are more as well. Politicians tend to be informed by their own egos, it's true. And there are all sorts of wayward agreements that are happening on a geopolitical level between governments and funding. So whether that's rich, high net worth individuals, whether it's companies, to pay for military action, right? Because war is very expensive, guys. War is very expensive, right?
And there's a
So
lot of money to be made.
there's a lot of money to be made. And as someone with a chemistry degree, I had the option to go into the defense industry, and it's something I rejected ultimately. But yeah, so whenever there's a war, there's someone paying for it. And so naturally, when you see a government going to war, there's an agreement somewhere. So I do think it was good that this movie portrayed that. Having said that, your last question was around his fate, right? And his fate was actually one of my favorite parts of the movie. And here's the reason why. I don't love the way how women are portrayed in this movie. But when I see Hawkgirl and her badassery in that moment, where he says to her, "Oh, you're not going to kill me. You're too weak." And she says, "Is it?" And drops him to his death. I loved it. I loved it because it was juxtaposed with Superman, who I do consider to be a bit too on the soft side. I think historically, when we've had these sorts of characters, they have been taken out with violence. So I'm glad that they had a woman come in and just do what had to be done, basically, because Superman wasn't going to do it.
The thing about the Eastern European shady villain trope
Mm,
in movies is very true. I was very tickled by how the movie was trying to make sure they covered their back for not being accused of too directly shoehorning a real life character by making sure he aesthetically doesn't look anything like Netanyahu. They were intentionally muddying the waters in that way. The people in Jarampur, both in appearance and the name of the area, are giving Pakistan a bit. They're giving Kashmir a bit. It's giving some South Asian elements to intentionally make it that you can't directly point at his character
mm-hmm.
and say,
Yeah.
you are saying that we just killed this person because he is committing war crimes, full stop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Found that very amusing. I want to talk about Lex's relationship with him
Mm-hmm.
because again, Lex is so obviously an Elon Musk esque character to me, so I couldn't help but continuously draw parallels. Elon Musk is currently pouring in a lot of money to try and get involved in the elections happening in the UK going
Mm-hmm.
forward, like he
Mm-hmm.
did with the US elections. And those are just the ones we know of. I'm sure there's even more in all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of countries. We know that Facebook has been directly or indirectly involved in the toppling of entire regimes in countries in the world and
Mm-hmm.
inadvertently even caused coups. So the concept of a billionaire locking hands with dictatorial figures is an interesting concept to explore. After Superman is essentially kidnapped by Lex, and Ghurkos is there, and he's saying to Lex, excellent job, well done with the trick of having the video sent out that says that his parents wanted Superman to come here, colonize the planet, and create a harem. And Lex says, "Oh, it's not fake." And he really says, "Oh, of course it's not. Excellent." I enjoyed seeing them show how even world leaders and dictators are sycophants to billionaires. Whatever you say goes, and how
Hmm.
embarrassing it can be, and how weak it can be. And I was under the impression that Lex Luthor got his team to engineer whatever that footage was to make it seem like his parents said that. Doesn't mean his parents didn't say it, but
Mm.
that he made sure that the final video that will go out to the world would have the worst interpretation of what these kind of people could be saying about Superman, to prey on people's worst tendencies about their fears of immigrants invading them,
Hmm.
only for me to speak to other people and read takes online. And a lot of people were like, no, no, no. The movie is saying that they did want him to do that, and that the beauty of this Clark Kent is, despite that, he still chooses to be a better man. And I'm really struggling with this take because I'm like, why would you believe that this kind of character would not weaponize his command of technology, disinformation, against his worst nemesis? People said that, oh, Mr. Terrific says that, oh, I know the guys that work over there, they wouldn't lie. Why
Mm.
wouldn't they lie? Do we not know what happens in the real world? We see intelligent people and tech experts being recruited all the time for the most malicious intents of the most conniving billionaires all the time. Why is that so hard to believe? I'm kind of really struggling with this.
I'm not upset about the ambiguity. When I watched it, I took it at face value. Although I could see when I was first introduced to this idea, I also assumed that he did some sort of data manipulation. I wasn't sure about the talents that the engineer, Lex Luthor's engineer, has, but I assumed that she did some sort of data manipulation. Having said that, I do think that I prefer the scenario in which the parents did say this because it gives us some nuance. It was actually one of the key parts of nuance that I enjoyed about this movie, right? Because through the parents saying this, we have that final scene with Superman looking for comfort and finding it within the people who adopted him. And I do think there's a powerful commentary there about how chosen family can be more powerful than biological family, which is really important. I think having this scenario where the parents are altruistic and they just want to help human beings for no apparent reason is almost boring for me. Like, okay, we've seen that a lot, that, oh, the biological parents are almost heaven like, they don't have anything negative about them. It's more interesting to have them being slightly tyrannical and saying, yeah, go and colonize them.
You mentioned chosen family. The concept of Kal-El landing on Earth and being discovered by the Kents, who are these small town rural people in Kansas who just have lots of love and warmth, and they raise him to be a fundamentally good person. So instead of being a weapon against the Earth, he is a force for good. It is inherently sweet and cuddly. This movie leans all the way into it, making his birth parents possibly
Mm.
tyrannical and making his adoptive parents extremely sweet. As a person who chosen bonds have been what have kept me sane over the last couple of years when I've been forced to be away from my home for extended periods of time, I really do enjoy storylines that make a point about how the people who choose to love you and who choose to form community with you can be the most powerful things that create the best things about you. I really do react well to those storylines. I didn't react great to it here because I found the writing and the depiction of the Kents to be too simplistic. Even that final scene that you liked a lot, when I realized what they were doing there, it did feel nice. I liked the use of the archival footage. And yet it didn't feel fully earned to me because the Kents didn't feel like real people to me.
I think, given that they've basically blown up the idea of his biological parents being these wonderful, loving parents, remember this movie is already very thematically heavy. I think having the complicated nuance of who the actual parents are probably would have been a bit too much. So I think out of all the things to sacrifice and the many characters who didn't get developed, not just the parents, I think that one was one that I could cope with.
I understand, but I don't need them to sit down for 20 minutes and have Ma and Pa Kent explain how this dark thing happened to them, then this good thing happened to them. I mean, the literal words that came out of their mouth sounded simplistic to
mm,
me. I think good writing can have those characters speak in 3 sentences, and I'm like, boom, I understand who those people are,
mm,
and they feel real and legitimate to me. Maybe part of this is also my bias because if you look at the statistics of the kind of person that they are depicting,
mm,
those are right now some of the most hateful people that exist. I'm not saying that older, white, rural people who mean good for the
mm,
world don't exist. They do
mm.
exist, but they are an extreme minority these days. Unfortunately, a lot of them have been
Yeah.
radicalized into extreme right wing pipeline. For me, that kind of characterization, you have to do a lot of work to convince me why those people are
I
like
do
that.
think it's because of your worldview. I think the way how the movie wants you to perceive this is that, well, why would they be like that if they're willing to adopt this alien child, right? But in real life, there are plenty horrifically racist people that are going around adopting children of color for their own nefarious reasons. Having said that, this movie doesn't have time to unpack all of that. I actually don't mind them just skipping it and just leaving it positive, given that they've already, once again, come for the biological family, completely blown up that storyline. They don't have time to get into the ethics of transracial adoption in small town America.
I think that the earnestness and idealism of the movie does work. Corin Sweat's earnestness works for me. His relationship with some other people in his family and love life, less so. I think that the concept of his fate and are we always destined to be who we become because of our DNA, because of what we're born into, is something that I enjoy, and I think it is well handled here. I think that some of it is again a bit on the nose, where towards the end you have people literally say that just because your parents said that doesn't mean that you don't have to do that. I think Pa Kent literally says it to him, the oh, our job as parents is to let you make your own mistakes. And again, some of that it just feels like it's stuff I've heard in 100 coming of age movies. I just wanted it to be a bit more poetically passed across to the audience. But that this isn't that kind of movie, I
I
suppose.
did enjoy that little monologue. Is it a bit cheesy? Is it cliche? Sure. But I think, believe it or not, in our current society, it's still very much radical to say that as a parent, my job is not to enforce a persona on you, it is to give you the tools so that you can figure out this thing called life on your own. It's still a very radical point. So I think,
You're actually right.
reg-
You are right
like,
about that.
regardless of how many times it needs to be stated, let's do it.
Let's talk about gender in this film. Eve as a character was interesting, and her relationship with Jimmy Olsen was interesting. What did you think?
Yeah, so the Eve character is one of my least favorite parts of this movie by far. I wasn't
Same.
impressed with how this movie treats women at all. I'm not even sure what they want us to understand about Eve, because on the one hand, she's basically a plot device. Let's call it what it is. She's the reason why the journalists and Lewis specifically are able to work out what's really going on with Lex Luthor and Ghurkos' character. But at the same time, I think given how important she is, and there's an implication that she's almost a mastermind behind this whole thing, that she's taking pictures as quietly collecting evidence to expose Lex Luthor, the abuser. I think that you can't have that and then also make her be the source of comic relief in this movie. Because during the screening that we went to, the biggest laughs came from the Eve is a dumb, hot blonde trope jokes, with her being so obsessed with Jimmy for no apparent reason other than the fact that he doesn't abuse her in the way how Lex Luthor does. So the juxtaposition of her being physically abused, right? He throws things at her at one point, with her being this bumbling, quote unquote, hot blonde trope, but then also her being a mastermind. It was not well done for me at all. I didn't appreciate it.
Eve was just typical James Gunn stuff to me. James Gunn, when it comes to women in his movies, has one or two archetypes that he always does, and Eve just falls into one of them for me. I had very little patience for it. I didn't really find it funny. And I don't mean like I was offended. I just mean I was like, it's not that amusing. This is going on too long now. I wasn't
Mm,
outraged. I was just like, this is almost distracting from the tone of the film, in my opinion. The thing that the bits they're doing with Jimmy Olsen, who I think I like the actor, I thought he did the character quite well, is that he's like this accidental ladies man, basically. He just has so
mm,
much riz. So they just act crazy over him, even though he just looks like
mm,
some regular guy. And like you said, we then use this as a plot device for how our characters of the Daily Planet get access to certain bits of information. For me, it's just played too much for laughs for it to make sense to me. I'm not saying that there aren't pretty girls that act a fool over more regular looking guys that are not paying them attention. That is actually a real thing that happens. But I'm
Mm,
not sure James Gunn understands the dynamics of that properly, and I don't think this film is depicting that correctly. I just found it kind of lazy. I thought the actress that was playing Eve was underserved because she had good comedic timing and all, but I don't know, it just felt kind of
mm.
flat to me. I didn't enjoy it very much.
I think my honest opinion is this was written in to appeal to incel adjacent men. It's the fantasy, right? That, you could be an average guy and you're gonna have this hot woman who's gonna be obsessed with you, but then they can basically reject her, right? And then
And you
therefore that
can
gives
save
them a feeling
her.
of status. Yeah, you can save her. Meanwhile, she's the one that's saving you. So again, it's like it's just not a very serious interpretation of who I think this movie is trying to tell me Eve is. I didn't appreciate it at all. And the reason why I was confident in that assessment is because we then have a second hot, dumb, blonde trope woman, which is Lois's colleague, Kat, stumbling around, dressed to the nines in the office, boobs out. And again, nothing wrong with that, but boobs out, heels on. And she doesn't have anything interesting to say. When she's talking, other people basically ignore her. And I thought, yeah, this movie doesn't like women at all. Wasn't
I
impressed.
didn't understand what on earth they were doing with the cat character. I was so confused. I literally was like, what is this that they're doing with the cat character? That is an established character in Superman lore.
Really?
Yes, Kat is a character that has relationships with Lois and Clark and Jimmy and all of them. This
Mm,
whole popped up push up bra, peroxide blonde hair, always oogly googly talking about these guys that did this and that to her. I just found it kind of bewildering. I was like, huh? I was like, if
mm,
you're going to include this character, what role is she serving in the story except to
none.
make the comic book where people know that you've included cats in your Superman story in this very bizarre way? I was confused by it. Literally, am I missing something here? Is she going to serve a wider role? She did not.
She didn't. No.
She's just there to be that way in the office for the sake of it. Again,
Mm-hmm.
James Gunn, your usual tricks. I would have forgiven all of this if the Lois character was as tight and as disciplined as I wanted her to be and was deserving of the casting of Rachel Brosnahan. But unfortunately, she wasn't for me. So that made these kind of failings even more unacceptable to me. This movie doesn't have a single female character that truly works.
No, it doesn't. And I noticed it immediately. And I think even with the Lois character, you've already alluded to it that I think that both of us can see elements of ourselves in her, right? As a woman who's known for being very cynical, I'm also very logical. I like to be very pragmatic, as she is. I'm very acutely aware of the fact that many people see that as annoying. And they especially see it as annoying when it's a woman doing it. And I think this movie does lean into that at times. Now, her pragmatism and her ability to question Superman is a very important part of this movie. But for the average viewer, they could watch this and just think, oh, she's just
She's a nag.
asking too much. She's a nag. She's annoying. Instead of looking at it as she's helping Superman to have more of a pragmatic approach, an ethical approach, a well thought out approach to his actions, which is incredibly important. So, yeah, there were no female characters that really worked for me in this. None of them are well written.
I think it's also a tonal issue with the movie in that Lois is our only character who, with these very heavy geopolitical themes that the movie is throwing
Mm,
out there, she's the only character that they allow ground it in real world politicking and
yeah,
real world consequences. If they had maybe distributed that between multiple characters, then we could see the
yeah,
dimensions of her a bit more. But because she is carrying that weight singularly, so she's serving as the singular mouthpiece of that in the film, you can't help but make her sound like a bit of a caricature of that kind of soapboxy cynic in a way that just doesn't work. Unfortunately, I wasn't outraged by the women. I was just bored.
Just watching it, I've been seeing people talk about the movie, and I'm even seeing women say, "Oh, we loved the fact that Lois, she was able to challenge Superman, and she was an intelligent woman, and then Eve is the one who masterminded this whole thing." And I'm like, ladies, your standards are in the gutter. You've accepted the standards of Hollywood, which is to have poorly written women characters, and now you're grasping at straws, trying to celebrate these characters who aren't very good. Lois's character, it gives me, when you hear religious people or Christian people specifically, and they'll say things like, the man is the head and the woman is the neck.
Yeah.
I consider that to be deeply misogynistic. And this movie leads into that Superman is the one who's ultimately going to be credited with saving the world, and everyone's going to give him all of the accolades and the praise. But he would not have been able to do it without Lois. He would not have been able to do it without Eve. And we're so used to this rhetoric of women being there to assist men, whether it's in a storyline or whether it's in real life. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired.
In this instance, though, is that not more of a, in this movie, Superman isn't fully the hero thing rather than a gender thing? Because Jimmy, arguably, and Green Lantern, arguably, go and put boots on the ground to save the day in more ways than Superman in many ways in this film. So
Mm,
in that particular line of criticism, is that not more of a wider way this film goes out of this way to not
mm,
actually have Superman be the one that solves the problems in this film? And the movie might be trying to make a point with that of saying no one is coming to save you. We all have to embolden ourselves.
mm. I get your point, and I do think it's a fair point. My issue is, in this movie, we see a number of men who are going about their own lives. They don't really care about what other people think. They're very much the main character in their life. Whereas all of the female characters are there to serve somebody else's purpose, and that somebody is a man. I am tired of it.
With Lois Lane, they do try and establish this individualist identity of hers by her basically alluding to be a bit alt. She literally
Mm,
says, I grew up punk rock, that I'm not good at this kind of stuff. I was like, again, I can feel a man's writing here because there's
mm-hmm,
nothing about the presentation of that Lois Lane character that is alt or punk rock in any way, shape, or form. In any way, shape, or form. She is a conventionally attractive, regularly dressing woman just navigating around the world, and nothing about the syntax that she uses to speak suggests someone that comes from any kind of cultural underbelly. So I was like, what do you mean she's punk rock? What have you shown? You've said it, you've told us that, you've written her character saying that. What have you shown us about the way she navigates society that suggests that? Or are you just a man that is fetishizing the idea of, oh, I'm this take no prisoners punk rock girlfriend that happens to be Superman's girlfriend, but you're not interested in understanding what those kind of women are like in real life and depicting them on the screen?
yeah. She's a manic pixie girl. Period. Period.
In the second half of the movie, I feel like they lose track of what to do with Lois, but they don't want her to be the damsel in distress that Superman
Yeah.
saves. So they have her team up with Mr. Terrific to go and essentially kind of help save the day and save Superman. And she's literally the one that is piloting their vehicles. The movie tries to write this away by saying that, oh, the technology is intuitive, so that's why she can fly it.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
was just there like, again, I know when a writer or a filmmaker is trying to seem progressive but without having to do any real work.
mm-hmm.
That's what it's
Mm-hmm.
giving.
It was definitely giving a woman character written by a man. Like, there was no multi-dimensional elements to it. I wasn't impressed at all. Who I was impressed with, but she didn't get much screen time, and therefore I can't conclude that she was well written, is Hawkgirl. I like the fact that she was ruthless, and it was a nice juxtaposition against Superman, who is portrayed as, in a way, potentially overly empathetic. Whereas we see Hawkgirl, she doesn't hesitate. She takes out the bad guy without even blinking twice, and that was a nice, refreshing depiction of a woman in this
I
movie
would
for
have
me.
liked to understand her character more. I didn't really get what she felt like, a chess piece to me, but I understand what you're saying. I thought the engineer was a character that was a plot device for me and a way to demonstrate, look at our CGI budget. I just was like, okay. I was like, that's cool CGI. And what is her actual relationship with Lex? Again, I don't need them to go into anybody's backstory and all of that. But to me, good superhero movie writing, you don't actually need to do that much.
I have to concede, my favorite CGI moment in the movie did come from the engineer. So it's that moment when she does a backflip. I don't even know how to describe it, but I loved it. I was like, oh, this is cool.
Oh, brother. I felt like that was such a let's have something to show in the cinema and have the audience go, wow,
It worked on
I
me.
am such a cynic. My favorite CGI moment probably was when she has sent her nanobites to kind of try and take over Superman's respiratory system. So he flies out into the atmosphere and actually basically into space to try and get them
Mm.
away. And it's kind of burning off of his face. And she's holding on to him, and Ultraman is holding on to him. And there's particular shots where they're like at the edge of the Earth's atmosphere, which that had to be a fully
Mm.
CGI shot. I actually thought it looked good, considering I know this has to be a completely CGI shot. I enjoyed that moment.
On the CGI part, the dog was crazy for me. The CGI was not good. It was giving Uncanny Valley. I felt really uncomfortable whenever there were close ups of the dog.
For me, my main thing was that that dog was looking hungry. That dog was not looking the best. And I understand by the end of the movie, they reveal he's Supergirl's dog and she's a bit of a party girl. Maybe she doesn't take care of him that well. But how long has Clark been taking care of this dog? James Gunn loves having little sidekick pets or anthropomorphic characters for our heroes to express their humanity through. It's just, and that can be cute. Like I love it when he does it with Groots in Guardians of the Galaxy. Here, it was giving a bit too much white people's relationships with their dogs for me. I was just
Hmm.
like, okay, that's enough now. At what point do you hand over this dog to your parents to take care of this dog while you handle business? Let's talk about one of my favorite moments in this film when we're in Lex Luthor's pocket universe and you see that he has a bunch of monkeys strapped in to some devices and they're there aggressively typing. And I think later on in the movie, you see that they're freed when the government comes to liberate them. I found that so funny. As a person who navigates the internet with a high level of suspicion of who I'm actually interacting with that's trying to trigger me at all times,
Mm.
I strongly
Mm.
believe there's a lot of bad faith actors that are using bot farms to encourage people, especially certain demographics, to have just stupid conversations that we don't need to be wasting our time having. I found that very funny. And this is why I believe that we're supposed to question the legitimacy of that video that Lex Luthor released out to the world. I think the use of the media in this film is good and bad. The good part is showing the relationship that billionaires and tech oligarchs have with media that they own and they appear on, and how they can use that to control the narrative and spread their propaganda. But on the flip hand, I actually think the movie was a bit outdated in how it was depicting that. They had him going on daytime talk shows and they had talking heads from the news to depict the proliferation of the news, but I find that outdated in the world we live right now. These tech dude bros, the way they proliferate their messages through the manosphere and podcasts and on the internet, their major way of passing their message across is not on CNN. It's with Theo Vaughn. It's with Andrew Schultz. It's with Fresh and Fit podcast. It's with Adrian Ross. So I felt like the movie was also showing the age of the writer a bit, that he doesn't actually properly understand how these kind of men pass around their toxic message. The last US election arguably was
Mm.
won through navigating that manosphere in a very, very intentional way.
Yes, I think that media and the way how it's portrayed in this movie, specifically as it pertains to propaganda, is one of the stronger points that the movie is making, in my opinion. This movie is indirectly asking us to examine the way how all of us as human beings are very vulnerable to storytelling. With propaganda, there's somebody somewhere building a narrative, and the whole point of media and the way how it's being used now is to push that narrative successfully onto people. Now, the way how this intersects with immigration is very, very important, not only in the movie but in real life. I come from Caribbean immigrants, and in the UK, when they arrived, there was a narrative at the time: no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. These sorts of sound bites and narratives can literally change the way how people think about other people. And so in the movie, this is explored through the message from Superman's parents that's being used to distort the way how the locals view Superman. And they say that he's been sent to Earth to basically collect a harem and to basically increase the Kryptonian race. It sounds very Elon Musky.
It was giving very much great replacement theory, and I enjoyed them calling that out.
I don't think everyone's going to receive the message, but I like the fact it's being put out there because we do need to examine the way how we consume media, and we do have to start holding institutions accountable. I don't know what the solution is to do this, given that it's so important, not only in the United States, in the UK, across Europe. Populist movements are becoming very powerful through literally spreading disinformation, and I love the way how this movie examines it.
What would you give Superman out of 10?
I would give Superman a 7 out of 10. As I've discussed, I like the movie overall. I was very entertained. It covers some of the themes that I talk about every day in my day-to-day life, themes that are very important to me, and in general, a lack of empathy that I see. Having said that, it wasn't a perfect movie. I have a serious problem with the depiction of women in this movie. Storytelling was cliche. There were too many tropes, in my opinion, but you could argue that's to be expected with a Superman movie. What did you think?
I will give Superman a 6.5 out of 10. It is generally entertaining. It is very thought provoking. We've just spoken for this movie for an extended period of time, and I could keep going on and on and on. And I think it's a movie that I will enjoy rewatching. I have serious problems with the writing of the script and the handling of certain characters. So ultimately, I can't give it its tens. It's a good popcorn
Mm.
movie that also makes you think a bit.
Now we're going to do the Bechdel test segment. So, the Bechdel test is a measure of representation of women in film and other fiction. In Alison Bechdel's comic strip, one woman explains that she only goes to a movie if it satisfies the following requirements. The movie must have at least two women in it. Those two women must talk to each other, and they must talk to each other about something other than a man. Yes. Do you think Superman passes the Bechdel test?
No, off the top of my head, no. The only time I can recall named women speaking to each other are Kat and Lois at some point in the Daily Planet, where Kat comes to sit on her desk and speak to her. And if I'm not mistaken, they were talking about some guy not replying to her text or something like that. So no. And I can't think of a single other time two women speak to each other. Maybe Lois speaks to Mark Kent when she's on the farm, but they're definitely going to be talking about Clark. So no.
So I think halfway through the movie, I concluded that I don't like the depiction of women in this movie. So I was not expecting the movie to pass the Bechdel test. So I was watching it like a hawk, waiting for two women to talk about something other than a man. And I actually do think it passes the Bechdel test, but it's for a very trivial, ridiculous reason. And I think it's actually Hawkgirl and Lois. So in that scene where they're gearing up to go and save Superman, basically, I think there's a very brief exchange between Hawkgirl and Lois, and they were not directly speaking about Superman. And
What did
even
they
then, I'm not
say?
confident. I'm not confident. I think they were talking about the politics of it all. So again, it's either this movie doesn't pass, or if it does pass, it will be that exchange. But again, it's like a okay, you know.
Well, the thing about the Bechdel test is that it's supposed to be intentionally a very low bar to demonstrate just how many movies don't pass it. So if it passes it, it passes it. But the fact that I couldn't recall anything is very unfortunate for a movie that has like four or five named female characters.
Yeah, we know Engineer Lady barely speaks. Lois, her whole purpose in the movie is to serve Superman. There's Hawk Girl, she's surrounded by men all the time. I wouldn't be surprised if it fails, but I do think it passes for that particular scene.
Does Eve speak to anybody in this movie except for Jimmy and Lex Luthor? I'm
Maybe
serious.
maybe a guard in the prison,
Okay.
which is a man.
Yeah, and Kat definitely doesn't speak much to any other female characters, if I'm not
No.
mistaken.
There was one other exchange between Kat and Lewis though. So there's an exchange where Lewis is watching the news and basically ignoring Kat. And again, a lot of people were ignoring Kat, so I had a big issue with that. Kat speaks to Lewis, but Lewis doesn't speak to her, so that doesn't count.
What does she speak to her about?
I think it was a man actually.
Exactly.
I think it was a man, yeah.
Okay, so our conclusion is that Superman probably passes the Bechdel test.
By fluke.
The Mariana Trench is 6,000 fathoms deep, and the lowest depth man has reached inside the earth. How deep is Superman?
Superman is very deep, but it's deep in a way that is palatable to a young audience and palatable to an American audience that may not be ready yet to fully deconstruct the place of the US military institution globally. So it introduces us to deep topics. Some of them it goes fairly deep within them, and others it holds back. But I understand why they've made that decision in each case. What about you? What do you think?
Superman is very, very deep. It's one of the deepest superhero movies I've ever watched. Doesn't mean it's one of the best. It's just very deep in that they are intentionally touching on major sociopolitical concepts under the veneer of a brightly colored comic book movie. To me, this is the first big blockbuster movie that is addressing the conflict in Gaza in such a direct way. The bar is kind of low, but that does mean something to me. So that makes it have a level of depth that a lot of movies don't have. And how it is trying to address what our identity is and what we are trying to figure out about how we live in multicultural society, chosen family, military industrial complex, men's ego. At the same time, though, when it comes to other things that other people have figured out how to do a long time ago, like writing women to make sense in real life, it completely and utterly feels like that.
The first comment says he's bold and he's torturing people who have hair. Is it really that deep?
It is that deep. That is a light-hearted way of talking about it. But really, this movie is about Lex Luthor feeling small and so lashing out at things that are big. So yeah, it is that deep.
But again, that's why I was surprised to see that Nicholas Hoult is so tall and basically the same height as David Corenswet. Next comment says, who in their right mind allowed this woke BS to even be conceived, never mind produced? Someone please tell me this was a parody. Is it really that deep?
Yes, yes, it is that deep. This person is upset and riled up because there are elements in this movie that will get people like this upset and riled up. Now, if they step back and actually looked at it, the movie is not actually that threatening to the positioning of the United States when it comes to global geopolitics and the military industrial complex. But if you're a person who has never really actually seen those kind of things confronted in this kind of film, then it will seem like too far to you. Describing James Gunn as some kind of woke filmmaker is just very funny to me, very ironic to me.
Again, I just think there's a certain category of people who are not yet ready to have the harsh conversations about the reality of what the US military complex stands for internationally. And I think that's probably where this is coming from. It's really exposing the people who really don't have basic, and I mean gutter basic empathy. Next comment says, an appeal to the male settlers' savior fantasies. Interesting. Is it really that deep?
I think this particular criticism that the movie is essentially just placing a band aid over the heart of people that may be distressed by the imagery they're seeing from Gaza, but they still may have some settler sentiments about them. If you believe that this movie is being very, very specific about Gaza only, then yes, it is that because that is essentially the kind of liberal James Gunn is.
Mm.
But I also don't fully think that it's as simple as that. I also think a very important thing to note about this movie when it comes to the concept of settlers and settler colonialism is that this film tries its best to critique settler colonialism from somewhat of a left wing point of view. But don't forget, there is a significant populist right wing movement who is against the US or Western involvement in settler occupation, not because they have an issue with the concept of that kind of settler colonialism, but because they just don't want their tax money to be spent on other people's matters. They don't care at all about the oppressed in that matter. And if anything, sometimes they might even be sympathetic to the oppressor, but they're still like, nope, focus on us first. And I think this movie is to some degree trying to make sure those kind of people can still enjoy it.
Mm. I would disagree with that. I disagree with that because of the point about the fact that it's not empathy based, and this entire movie, in my opinion, is empathy based. The people you're describing, their gripe is with the United States government spending money, and there's no conversation about the role that the United States government plays here. And that's the reason why I think it's not trying to appeal to those people. The world in general, in my opinion, is becoming increasingly nationalistic and it's becoming more insular, and there's a demand to stop putting our scarce resources into helping what they consider to be aliens, right? That's the way how this movie is presenting it. Aliens. I don't care about what's happening in Palestine. I don't care about what's happening in Congo. I don't care about what's happening in Sudan. My grocery bill's doubled, and that's what I care about.
Yeah, without realizing that those things are
Are
actually correlated
linked,
to each other.
literally linked, guys. But yeah.
I think there's also this fantasy that I see a lot of Westerners have, that I don't want you interfering in the politics of the developing countries. They don't really actually comprehend that their ability to travel to some of these countries visa free, their ability to have a strong currency versus these countries weaker currencies, is completely tied to that interference. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, if their governments were to completely cut that off the way they are fetishizing, they would. They actually do lose that ability.
This is the Dodgy Science segment. Des and I are both scientists. We have a background in chemistry, and so we often clock questionable science in things we are watching. And so we want to use this segment to discuss some of the things we observed or scientific elements we observed in Superman and how realistic they are. Of course, we know it's a Superman movie, so we're not expecting complete realism, but certain things still piqued our interest. So, Des, what were your thoughts on the science in this movie? It was very science heavy.
It was a very, very laughable movie when it came to science. That's what a lot of comic book movies are. So I don't take it seriously, and it didn't take away from the movie. If anything, it added to my entertainment while I was watching it. But there was all sorts of wild things flying around throughout, and I was like, "Wait, what now?" Let me unpack some of it for you right now. We have the character Metamorpho, who is capable of transforming himself to anything. So Metamorpho has weakened Clark by transforming himself to kryptonite. So for Clark to save the day properly, he needs to get his power back. And the only way he gets power is from the sun, but they don't have any access to the sun in this pocket universe. So they get Metamorpho to essentially transform part of his body into the sun. The sun isn't actually a special singular object. There are multiple suns all over the galaxy and in the universe. All the sun is essentially a hydrogen fusion nuclear reactor. A lot of energy in the form of light and radiation is passed out. So that's essentially what he's doing there in his bare
Mm-hmm.
hands. Except the core of the sun is several thousands of degrees Celsius. The amount of energy,
Like,
radiation, and exposure that would happen from being right in front of a hydrogen nuclear reactor would have immediately annihilated everything
mm-hmm.
within a wide radius of anything we are seeing in that film. I understand Superman is invincible, so maybe he wouldn't be destroyed, but everybody else in that prison should be.
I don't yet understand what we are supposed to believe about Superman's makeup. But okay, let's accept that he's not a human being like us. He's got some sort of extraterrestrial makeup, right? I was shocked to see that he was able to survive that. It reminded me of another point where I laughed so much, and I just thought this is dodgy science as well. Which is that scene where Superman takes the engineer and Ultraman outside of the Earth's atmosphere. And I thought to myself, we don't know who Ultraman is. And obviously it makes sense as to why he was able to survive it now. But that engineer, aren't we supposed to believe that she's some sort of human hybrid? So how was she able to survive going outside of the Earth's atmosphere?
It's not adding up. None of it makes any sense. I will also say the whole fundamental concept that Clark needs the sun to recuperate. Again, what is the sun? The sun is just a
Hmm.
nuclear reactor that's radiating out light and heat. That's all it is. It just is happening on a very, very, very large scale. I want to talk about the anti-proton river. When we first entered the pocket universe, they're like, "Oh, they're like, what's that over there?" And you see this weird glitchy Tetrisy thing, and they're like, "Oh, that's the anti-proton river. Better not fall in there." And I was like, "The anti what now?" As in the proton.
Yeah, it was the most ridiculous dodgy science element of this movie. I literally cracked up when I saw that. Because I was like, hang on. Again, what are we supposed to believe about Superman's makeup here? Because if I'm supposed to believe that he has any element similar to a human being, i.e., as human beings, we are just a bunch of cells basically, and all of those cells, they're comprised of atoms, and those atoms are made up of protons and neutrons and electrons, which means that if you come into contact with an anti-proton river, you're going to automatically annihilate. So imagine my surprise when I see Superman swimming in this thing, trying to keep the dog out of it. Why didn't he just immediately annihilate? That doesn't make any sense.
Also, the pocket universe is the entire space a vacuum because the whole concept of
Mm,
antimatter is that the moment any antimatter interacts with matter, they will annihilate each other. So, how is this anti-proton river just
exactly.
swimming around, surrounded by actual physical matter, including
Yeah.
sometimes Superman or Superman's clothes or
Yeah.
his sleeves or his hair or the baby he's holding up? And I was just like, this is completely
Ridiculous.
preposterous. Complete nonsense. Just utter rubbish. Also, with the concept of Superman's makeup, right? Superman is an alien, but he is from, as far as we understand, our own universe. And all the models of what potential alien species would be like within our universe that I understand, they will still fall into our rules of the laws of physics and chemistry in our universe, which is that there are roughly about 150 elements. There is no model I regularly see that suggests that if an alien species suddenly appeared to Earth from one of our galaxies or one of our neighboring solar systems or something, they would be made of an exotic type of
Yeah,
matter
exactly.
that we don't have any knowledge of. And
Mm,
therefore, like you said, the moment they interact with antimatter, they should be annihilated. But then again, maybe the Superman is quite literally impossible to
yeah.
destroy. And if it is in fact a vacuum, how come any of the other aliens seem to be able to exist in there?
Mm-hmm. It was really, really ridiculous. I was
Just
literally laughing,
nonsense,
like
just
laughing out
nonsense.
loud.
You know, one thing we don't have questions about is the cloning process. Cloning is not some speculative science that we haven't actually accomplished yet. We have. They cloned a sheep a long time ago. It is
Mm,
very possible to clone things. You know what's not possible? You can't clone an adult and then the clone you produce is the same age as the adult. This is a thing sci-fi always does, and it has never made any sense to me.
and that's it for now. Thank you for going deep with us this episode. Please rate and like us on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're streaming this from.
Thanks for listening and see you next time.